Good morning and welcome to today's Crenshaw Essential Scope meeting. We will begin today's meeting in about 5 minutes. That's at 10:05 to allow everyone time to log in to today's presentation. Thank you for your patience and thanks for joining us. We're going to start in about 2 minutes at 10:05. In about 2 minutes at 10:05. We want to allow everyone time to log in and access today's meeting. Thank you. We're going to start at 10:05 in just a minute. Well, good morning and thank you for joining us today. This is the third public scope meeting for the Crenshaw Northern Extension project, and my name is Patrick Chandler, the Community Relations Manager for this project. I note to any elected officials who would like to be introduced to this meeting, please post your name and office you're with in the Q&A section. As a reminder to everyone, we will be taking comments at the end of the presentation. At this stage, during this initial scoping period, we will not be answering specific questions, but rather encourage comments regarding the project and proposed alternatives and options. We also want you to tell us what is important to study during the draft EIR, which might include key destinations that you think are important to serve, what makes this an important transportation service for you, and or what concerns do you have about the construction impacts? All this will be released later and should ultimately answer any questions you may have regarding the project and potential impacts and mitigations. We will talk more about that and other logistics later. Please note that the chat function has been disabled for this meeting. Instead, all comments during today's meeting should be submitted either in writing or during the oral comments period following our presentation. Of course, you can always comment outside of today's meeting through our project website, metro.net/Crenshaw North, our project email, crenshawnorth@metro.net, and our project hotline at 213-418-3093. Comments will be accepted until Friday, May 28th, 2021. Additionally, we will post all the recordings of the scoping meetings on our project page. The draft EIR, which will be released later and should ultimately answer any questions you have regarding the project and potential impacts and mitigations. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to introduce any elected officials' offices if we have any in joining us today. Looks like we don't. So interpretation, some quick housekeeping items. We have both Spanish and Russian translation available for this and we've also had it for all of our project scope meetings. For either interpretation, just click on the world or globe icon and pick the language you would like to listen to and follow along as we move through the presentation. As I'm speaking, the Russian translator is actually translating at the same time. Go ahead, Ellen.
Para recordarles que tenemos interpretación en español disponible para esta y todas las juntas informativas. Solo tiene que hacer clic en el icono de mundo para escoger el lenguaje de español.
All right, thank you. Please note that today's meeting is being recorded and that all attendees' cameras are off with microphones muted until the comment period, which will immediately follow Metro's presentation. If you have any technical issues accessing the meeting and presentation, please call or text our hotline, technical hotline at 213-316-6105. That's 213-316-6105. To ensure a fair and equitable process by all participants, we ask that you please follow these rules and respect the meeting format and everyone's opportunity to comment. So please turn off your cell phones and background noise when speaking, treat fellow community members, agency representatives, Metro staff, and others with respect, address all comments to Metro staff and consultants, not other attendees, and please maintain a conversational tone. Here's today's agenda for the scoped meeting. We will start with a 30-minute presentation on the project, which will include a brief history and background, project goals and objectives, and the alternatives currently under study. We will then give an overview of the EIR, the environmental process, and the next steps for the project. After we finish the presentation, we will be here until noon to allow enough time for participants to provide comments. And with that, I'll turn it over to our project manager, Roger Martin, and Deputy Project Manager, Alex Basavi, who will take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Hey, thanks, Patrick, and good morning to everybody. And thank you for joining us on your Saturday morning. Really appreciate you doing that with us. But let me just give you information about scoping. It's of course, is the first step in the environmental clearance process, consistent with the California Environmental Quality Act, or often we use the term CEQA. For awareness, there is no federal funding associated with the project right now, so we're not clearing it under NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act over there. But during this meeting, of course, we have three objectives. One, of course, is to provide an overview of the project and alternatives under study. Second is to describe the draft EIR process and how it will apply to the project. And third, of course, we want to hear from you on the project, including the project alternatives and options that Alex is going to go through here in a few minutes with you. and of course, any environmental issues of particular concern to you. But before we go forward, we'd like to show you a short introductory video that'll give you some background on the project and alternatives under study. Can we show the video, please?
Metro is planning rail to bridge divides. We want to provide you the latest information on the Crenshaw Northern Extension, which will create an important north-south connection through the heart of LA.
Some of the biggest employment centers and destinations in Southern California are also the hardest to get to. Central LA has some of the worst traffic in the entire county, and while Metro's rail network is expanding west, this area is still not directly served by high-capacity transit.
Metro has a plan to make it easier to get around, with dozens of projects to improve public transportation, including the Crenshaw Northern Extension.
This project will help to fill in key parts of Metro's network to connect more people to more places and create more access to opportunity by connecting areas that have been historically separated by the I-10 freeway and uneven amounts of investment.
We're preparing the next phase of planning on this project, but before we get into the latest updates and next steps, we'll give a quick recap of how we got here.
During the planning of the Crenshaw LAX project, Metro identified the need to fill the gap between LAX, the E line, D line, and the B line. The Crenshaw Northern Extension was included as a project to be funded by Measure M, a half-cent sales tax measure that passed in 2016.
While Measure M has this project slated for the future, Metro is planning it now because there are exploratory efforts that could make funding available sooner.
In summer of 2018, Metro finished an initial feasibility study and alternatives analysis for this project, which identified 5 potential routes or alternatives. In the fall of 2020, Metro completed an advanced alternative screening study, which further studied these routes.
During the alternatives analysis study, public comments included preferences on routes, as well as transit connections and destinations to be served, including the Hollywood Bowl, the need for pedestrian safety and having rail at a different level than the street, concerns about neighborhood preservation and access to stations.
Based on public feedback and additional study, we further refined our alternatives to 3 potential routes for this project, which are the La Brea alternative, the Fairfax alternative, and the Fairfax-San Vicente hybrid alternative.
From the E line, all alternatives go north up Crenshaw Boulevard to a proposed station at Crenshaw Adams in the core of West Adams. From there, all go north to a proposed station at the Midtown Shopping Center with connections to the Pico Rimpau Transit Center.
The La Brea alternative goes up La Brea Avenue, connecting to the future Metro D line at Wilshire La Brea, and then to Highland Avenue to link up to the Metro B line at Hollywood Highland Station.
The Fairfax alternative goes up Fairfax Avenue, connecting to the future Metro D line station at Wilshire Fairfax, with a station at Museum Row. From there, it heads north with a proposed station near the Grove. It turns east at Santa Monica Boulevard before connecting to the Metro B line at Hollywood Highland Station.
The Fairfax-San Vicente alternative also goes north on Fairfax Avenue, with proposed stations to serve Museum Row and the Grove, before veering west on Beverly Boulevard to serve Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and the Beverly Center. It then turns north on San Vicente, with the proposed station to serve West Hollywood's Nightlife District and the Pacific Design Center, before turning east to link up to the Metro B line at the Hollywood Highland Station.
Based on public input, we've also added an optional Hollywood Bowl terminus to each of these alternatives. A station at the Hollywood Bowl could improve the travel options to this major regional destination while serving up to 1 million trips there each year.
These are the alternatives that we will be taking into the environmental process. Environmental review is a formal, regulated process where Metro will study various aspects of each alternative, including benefits, cost, feasibility, community impacts, and any necessary mitigations.
There are several points of community input during this process as Metro develops the Environmental Impact Report, which will recommend a proposed project to the Metro Board of Directors for approval.
We are now embarking on the first step in this process, which is called scoping. At this stage, we want to hear from you about what Metro should consider and study as we prepare the Environmental Impact Report for the Crenshaw Northern Extension.
Possible comments might include input on destinations that you think are important to serve, what would make this a good transportation service for you, or concerns you might have about construction impacts.
We will be conducting formal scoping meetings where we can hear your comments. We'll also have information about the project online for you to browse on your own time.
We can also take formal comments via mail, phone, email, and our website during the scoping comment period. Thank you for all of your input along the way that has helped to shape this project. And as always, if you have questions, please get in touch.
Perfect. Okay, thanks for that. So as noted in the video, the Crenshaw Northern Extension would extend the Crenshaw LAX line, which is currently under construction, north from the E or the Expo line to connect to the D or the purple line at Wilshire Boulevard and to the B and the red line in Hollywood. So if you're not familiar with the map on the right, let me take you through it. The green line, of course, well, that's the green line. That's our east-west line. And just above that connection is the LAX People Mover. And the next line up for that, the sky blue type color, that's the Expo line or the E line. And the dashed purple line, of course, is the purple line under construction. It'll open up a few more years from now. And then we have the arrow, the pink pointed dash line is pointing to the Hollywood Highland Station at the Metro Red line or the B line. So by closing this gap in the regional north-south transit network, the project would directly link to 4 of Metro's rail lines and 5 of our heaviest bus lines in the entire county, allowing for one seamless one-seat ride from the South Bay, South LA, LAX, and all the way to Mid-City, Central Los Angeles, West Hollywood, and Hollywood, as well as further connections to the San Fernando Valley via the Metro B or the Red Line. In fact, the project would allow future Crenshaw LAX line riders to access the entire Metro Rail system, including all Metro Rail stations with at most just a single transfer. Additionally, the project could provide service to some of the busiest and most dense employment and activity centers in Southern California. But based on the Measure M schedule, which was approved by the LA County voters in 2016, construction for the project would start in the year 2041 and open for service in the year 2047. Measure M provided $2.24 billion in funding for the project. However, efforts to accelerate the project are being explored with the City of West Hollywood in coordination with the City of Los Angeles and Metro, conducting an early project delivery study in 2020 to identify alternative funds that could potentially help build the project sooner. And with that, so the project, of course, the project aims to satisfy multiple objectives, including, of course, closing this regional transit network gap. We want to provide a fast and reliable transit alternative to congested roadways and highways. As many of you are aware of the project area, it's pretty darn congested due to the concentration of jobs, residents, and major destinations within this region. Of course, at the same time, travel within and through this area, it's constrained due to the high demand for travel, coupled with the limited roadway capacity over here. And what we want to do is, of course, we want to improve the mobility and accessibility, not just within the project area in central LA, but throughout the county and the wider region. And last, of course, we want to cultivate a transit-friendly environment to maximize the potential for smart population and job growth. So if this project were to be constructed, the project would greatly improve mobility and access to jobs and opportunities for all county residents, especially transit-dependent residents and equity-focused communities from the South Bay and South LA all the way to the San Fernando Valley. And with that, Alex is going to take you through the alignments and options, and I'll see you folks in a few minutes. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Roger. This next map shows how the project fits into the overall transportation network and other Measure M projects underway in this general area, including, as Roger mentioned, the Purple Line extension, which will open to Beverly Hills in just 3 years and all the way to Westwood by 2027. This project would directly connect to the Purple Line in the Miracle Mile area. To the north in the San Fernando Valley, we have the North Hollywood Pasadena Bus Rapid Transit Project. And between the San Fernando Valley and the west side, there's the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, which will link these two regions and ultimately all the way down to the LAX airport. Before I go into the specific alternatives for the project, here's a brief history of some of the past studies that are related to our current efforts. From as far back as 2003, planning studies for the Crenshaw LAX line explored opportunities to extend the Crenshaw LAX line to Wilshire and the Purple Line, and even further north to Hollywood. However, due to funding constraints, any segment of the Crenshaw LAX line north of the Expo or E line was eliminated from the Crenshaw LAX line project back in 2009. At roughly the same time, the West Side Subway Extension Draft EIS-EIR studied a potential heavy rail extension from Hollywood through West Hollywood and Mid-City West to the Purple Line on Wilshire. The current studies for a northern extension of the Crenshaw LAX line began in 2016 with the passage of Measure M and Metro's board commitment to bring the project, along with others, to a shovel-ready status in case of potential funding opportunities for project acceleration. As Roger mentioned, the initial alternatives analysis study was completed in 2018, followed by an alternative screening study last year in 2020. This next map shows the initial 5 alternatives that were explored in the alternatives analysis study. From west to east, they were San Vicente, La Cienega, Fairfax, La Brea, and Vermont. The AA study showed that all alternatives to Hollywood would attract significant ridership with approximately 90,000 boardings or more on a daily basis. The La Brea alternative is the shortest, fastest, and most cost-efficient alignment. It's the most direct route between Mid-City and Hollywood with a minimum total of 6 new stations over about 6.5 miles. Part of the original alternatives analysis study looked at existing jobs and residents within just a half-mile walking distance of all the alternatives that extend to Hollywood. This analysis showed that while all of the alternatives serve a significant number of jobs and residents, the Fairfax and Fairfax-San Vicente alternatives and stations serve the most jobs and residents by far by directly linking some of the biggest job centers in the region, including places like the Grove Farmers Market, CBS Television City, the Pacific Design Center, and the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center campus. The jobs and residents analysis showed that compared to the La Brea alternative, the Fairfax alternative would serve more than twice the number of jobs than La Brea, and the San Vicente alternative would serve more than quadruple the number of jobs than La Brea, or double that of Fairfax. Even when broken down by distance, the longer Fairfax and San Vicente alternatives would serve significantly more residents and especially jobs per mile than La Brea. In line with this analysis, existing transit ridership near potential project stations also reflects the heavy activity and congestion near some of the major job centers in the study area. Transit ridership near the Fairfax alternative stations is roughly 3 times that of the La Brea alternative stations, while transit ridership and boardings near the Fairfax San Vicente alternative stations is over 4 times that of La Brea. And this has largely been reflected in the comments and feedbacks we've received to date regarding the project. We've had several opportunities for public meetings throughout the previous studies and have collected a significant number of comments so far, many of which have shaped the current alternatives and options under study. Overall, we've heard strong support for the project and accelerating the project, opening it sooner than the Measure M schedule date of 2047. We've also heard preferences for the project to serve some of the major destinations and job centers in the western half of the project area, including a desire to combine alternatives or build more than one, or even build all. We've also heard considerable support for extending the line further north than Hollywood Highland and the B or Red Line connection in order to serve the Hollywood Bowl at Highland and the 101. Based on public feedback and additional technical analyses, we have refined the project alternatives to the 3 routes shown on this map for further study during this EIR environmental process. All of these alternatives would be entirely underground in a subway configuration, including everywhere north of Olympic and south of Venice. There is a potential exception to this along a small section of San Vicente Boulevard in Mid-City, which I'll get to shortly. Before I go through each of the alternatives, I'd like to emphasize that all alternatives have the same station locations, both in the north and in the south. In the south, all the alternatives extend the Crenshaw LAX line north from its terminus at Crenshaw Expo, under Crenshaw Boulevard to a station at Crenshaw and Adams in West Adams. They all then continue north to a station at Midtown Crossing and the Pico Rimpau Transit Center in the heart of mid-city along San Vicente between Venice and Pico. Similarly, in the north end of the project, all the alternatives have a station at Santa Monica and La Brea in eastern West Hollywood and at Hollywood and Highland to connect to the Metro B or Red Line, with an additional optional station at the Hollywood Bowl. So the primary difference between the alternatives is between the Midtown Crossing station in Mid-City in the south and the Santa Monica La Brea station in the north. The La Brea alternative would use La Brea Avenue as a more direct route to connect the Midtown Crossing station with Hollywood, with 2 additional stations at Wilshire La Brea connecting to the D or Purple Line and Beverly La Brea near the neighborhood of Hancock Park. Like all the alternatives, it would then continue north to stations at Santa Monica La Brea and Hollywood and Highland, with an optional extension north to the Hollywood Bowl. As mentioned before, the La Brea alternative would have a minimum of 6 stations over 6.5 miles. The total travel time between the Expo line all the way to Hollywood Highland would be just over 12 minutes. This next map gives some more context to the La Brea alternative, as well as the other 2 longer alternatives, which I'll go through now, Fairfax and Fairfax San Vicente. The Fairfax alternative would follow San Vicente Boulevard from Mid-City's Midtown Crossing Station, then Fairfax Avenue north through Miracle Mile and Mid-City West, with additional stations at Wilshire Fairfax to connect to the Metro D or Purple Line, and under Fairfax between 3rd and Beverly, near the Grove and CBS Television City. It would then continue north to a station at Santa Monica and Fairfax in Central West Hollywood and proceed, just like La Brea and all the alternatives, to Santa Monica La Brea and Hollywood Highland with an optional extension to the Hollywood Bowl. This alternative would have a minimum of 7 stations over 8 miles, with the total end-to-end travel time to Hollywood Highland of about 15 minutes, or 3 minutes longer than La Brea. And finally, the last alternative, the Fairfax San Vicente or hybrid alternative, would follow the exact same route and stations as the Fairfax alternative, north to a station at Wilshire Fairfax in Museum Row, and a station under Fairfax between Beverly and 3rd, near the Grove Farmers Market and CBS Television City. From there, it would veer west under Beverly Boulevard to a station at Beverly and La Cienega, near the Beverly Center, Beverly Connection, and Cedars-Sinai Medical Center campus. It would then head north to a station at Santa Monica and San Vicente to serve the Pacific Design Center, West Hollywood's Rainbow District, and the Sunset Strip. It would then continue east under Santa Monica Boulevard with stations at Santa Monica and Fairfax, and just like all the alternatives, Santa Monica La Brea and Hollywood Highland, with an optional extension to the Hollywood Bowl. This alternative also includes a potential optional station at Santa Monica and La Cienega as well, though it may be possible to serve Western West Hollywood with a single station, including possibly somewhere between San Vicente and La Cienega. Also, it's important to note that this Fairfax San Vicente hybrid alternative would serve all of the same station areas and destinations as the Fairfax alternative, plus additional destinations along the San Vicente corridor. This Fairfax San Vicente or hybrid alternative would have a minimum of 9 stations over just under 10 miles, with the total travel time of 20 minutes all the way to Hollywood and Highland. So between 4 and 5 minutes longer than the Fairfax alternative from end to end, and up to 8 minutes longer than the La Brea alternative from end to end. Or in other words, the La Brea alternative would be 3 minutes shorter than Fairfax and up to 8 minutes shorter than Fairfax San Vicente. The Fairfax San Vicente or hybrid alternative was introduced directly as a result of public feedback we've received on the project to date. It provides a much easier connection for riders transferring between the Purple Line and this project by moving that connection to Wilshire Fairfax. The previous connection at Wilshire San Vicente would have required riders to walk up to a third of the mile to transfer between these 2 lines. The new Fairfax San Vicente alternative, as shown on the map, could potentially serve most of the major activity centers in the project area while still offering a fast, reliable, and competitive travel option for regional through riders and trips that traverse this entire area. While this alternative has several curves in the northern half of the project area, This type of curvature is quite common on mass transit systems, especially subway systems, throughout the country and around the entire world. By being entirely below ground in subway tunnels, these types of alignments can directly link major activity centers and areas of significant transit ridership directly together while maintaining fast travel speeds and in a more cost-effective manner than building multiple separate lines and projects in a particular geographic area, given our heavily constrained resources and major Measure M commitments throughout the entire county. Also, all of these curves, in accordance with Metro's rail design criteria, would have wide radii and are located directly adjacent to potential stations where trains are already slowing and stopping, thereby greatly minimizing any travel time delay for riders. A great way for you to experience what these curves would be like to ride as a rider, you can ride the Metro B or Red Line subway through East Hollywood between Hollywood Western and the Sunset Vermont stations. Because of the wide radius of that curve from under Vermont to under Hollywood, as well as its adjacency to the Vermont Sunset Station, it's nearly impossible to notice any slowdown or time delay due to the curve itself. Regardless of alternative, each line and extension, including this project, requires a maintenance and storage facility for the additional light rail vehicles that will be needed to operate this full line from South LA, South Bay, and LAX all the way to Hollywood. The draft EIR will explore several potential sites for this facility adjacent to and near the current Southwest Yard that is being constructed for the current Crenshaw LAX line, which is located just northeast of LAX around the intersections of Aviation Boulevard and Arbor Vita. This next slide shows peak period travel time comparisons between some major points throughout the county and project area with and without the project. The first two columns are origins and destinations. The third column is typical peak period or rush hour travel times by auto. The next column or fourth column shows typical peak period travel times on the existing and future transit network, but without the project. So these times incorporate other Measure M transit projects that are scheduled to open before this project, but do not include this project itself. And finally, the last column shows the travel times with this Crenshaw Northern Extension project in place. For example, a trip from Hollywood to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center could be reduced from over 30 minutes during rush hour to just 8 minutes every time, regardless of traffic or time of day. Cedars-Sinai to West Adams could be reduced from almost an hour today to just 10 minutes every time, regardless of traffic or time of day. Leimert Park to Westwood could go from over an hour today, to 26 minutes. And LAX all the way to Miracle Mile or the Grove could go from over an hour today to just half an hour every time, regardless of traffic. In addition to the three different alternatives, there are several design options that we would like your input on, which are shown on this map. I'll go through each one starting in the south with the alignment options between West Adams and Mid-City. As you can see on this next map, we have two route options that would link the Crenshaw Adams and Midtown Crossing stations. Alignment option 1 would primarily run below the major roadways of Crenshaw and Venice Boulevards, while alignment option 2 would follow a shorter, more direct route between these two stations. Next slide, please. The vast majority of the project, if not the entire project, could be in a subway or underground configuration. Depending on this next option, the entire project could be 100% subway or underground from end to end. Again, with this next option, the entire project would be in a subway. We previously
Next slide, please.
We previously shared a vertical profile option that would include coming out of the ground in Mid-City with potential at-grade rail in the median of San Vicente Boulevard, between approximately Stanley Avenue, which is just east of the San Vicente Fairfax Olympic intersection, and La Brea Avenue, where it transitioned up to an aerial structure to serve an aerial station at Midtown Crossing before going back underground near the West Boulevard Bridge. Based on feedback we've heard from the community, we have added a fully underground or subway design option for this section, including an underground or subway station at Midtown Crossing. The rest of the project, regardless of alternative or option, would run in a subway or underground configuration due to a variety of major factors, including heavy traffic volumes and congestion, existing roadway widths and limited capacities, adjacent land uses, and the need to be grade separated from traffic at major intersections. With this San Vicente subway design option included, the entire project, regardless of alternative, would be 100% entirely in a subway or underground configuration. And finally, at the northern end of the project, we've added an option to extend the line further north from Hollywood Highland and the Beer Red Line, with the potential northern terminus station at the Hollywood Bowl near Highland and the 101 freeway. And now Roger will take us through the EIR process and next steps for the project.
Perfect. Hey, thanks, Alex. As we mentioned before, we're currently in the state environmental clearance phase of the project and the draft environmental impact report and advanced conceptual engineering. Advanced conceptual engineering is what we actually use to feed into the draft environmental impact report. But following this work here, of course, the project will need to go through further engineering and design work, including possible federal environmental clearance if any federal funds were to be identified for the project. After that, the final engineering or design construction can begin, followed by revenue service of this line. On the next slide here, of course, the environmental clearance phase of the project will analyze the project and its potential impacts and benefits from a variety of standpoints, including construction feasibility and potential mitigation measures that could lessen or even avoid any potential adverse impacts from the project and its construction. On this slide here, you'll see a lot of examples of potential impacts and resources that we will study during this process, including things like air quality, soil, ground conditions, of course, to energy and water resources. The EIR analysis will also include a full assessment of impacts during construction of the project as well. Station construction is generally where we have our biggest impacts because the excavation is only generally at the stations. In between, of course, the tunnel boring machines go under the streets and under properties, and we're pretty good there. So at the intersections around the stations, we may generally close an intersection for several weekends where we go in and excavate about 10 feet down, and we put a cross beams across the street and then put a concrete deck over that. And so for the next several years, we're actually building the station underneath the street and not having these impacts to traffic and transportation, of course, like that. But the EIR will evaluate and identify the tunnels and station construction processes for all the proposed alternatives, including truck hauling routes and other traffic considerations, as well as air quality, noise levels, and during specific construction activities. And on the next slide here, we're going to talk about funding considerations. So the EIR will also include a more detailed analysis of costs for the project alternatives, building off the initial estimates from the previous studies. Each of these alternatives will cost more than the Measure M allocation for this project, so other potential funding sources would be crucial for project feasibility. These sources could include unidentified federal, state, and/or local funding, as well as value capture mechanisms and potential public-private partnerships that could help shoulder some of these additional costs. And with that, again, I'd like to thank you very mumuch for joining us on this Saturday morning. I'm going to turn it back over here to Patrick, and thank you again.
Thanks, Roger. Just if anyone's having technical issues, please actually put it into our Q&A box. We're having a little issue with the phone number we gave you earlier. So any technical issues, please put that in the Q&A box. So for the next steps of the EIR process, we will be gathering and documenting all community input at this and other scoping meetings, as well as through mail, email, and our project hotline. We will then use that feedback to further refine alternatives and assess the full spectrum of impacts of each alternative, both during construction and once in operation, including possible mitigation measures to reduce these impacts to a less than significant level, or even avoid or eliminate certain impacts. By the end of the draft EIR process, we hope to identify a proposed project to bring back to the Metro Board for their approval. I want to give you a rundown of the next steps before we start taking your comments, should some of you leave after sharing your comments. After we receive all of your comments during the scoping period, we will prepare a scoping report which summarizes all the comments And we will use all that information as we go forward in the environmental process, including future community meetings to provide periodic updates for the community. Right now, we're at the beginning of May, and I assume we'll be back in the fall with an update on all the comments we've heard, what the next steps are, and an update on how we are proceeding with the analysis. Metro will post all information on the project page. You can go there to get information about meetings, status, reports that are available. We will notify everyone who came to this meeting, who signed in. We will add your information to our stakeholder list about future meetings. Again, we will post all recordings of the scope meetings on our project page. We strongly encourage everyone to provide feedback however they can, whether it's today or through email, mail, etc. Some key topics you want to share include what are the environmental issues you may be concerned about? Do you have a preference regarding the alternatives or design options under consideration, including potential station locations? We ask that you limit your comments today to 2 minutes to allow everyone who would like to participate a chance to provide feedback. We will be listening to and documenting all of your comments, but we will not be answering questions at this time or in this forum. And just a reminder, when you are speaking, turn off your cell phones or any background noise when speaking. Remember, treat fellow community members, agency representatives, Metro staff, and others with respect, and address all comments to Metro staff and consultants, not other attendees, and please maintain a conversational tone. In order to submit oral comments today, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom or dial *9 on your phone. When we've announced that it's your turn to speak, you'll be prompted to unmute your mic, both on Zoom and on your phone. You'll have 2 minutes to comment. Please try to pace yourself as you speak. Our court reporter is transcribing your comments as you're speaking. You can also submit written comments today using the Zoom Q&A feature. And of course, you can always submit comments to our project hotline, which is 213-418-3093, or by emailing us at crenshawnorth@metro.net. And I just wanted to pause there for a second to recognize Mayor Horvath with the City of West Hollywood, Councilman Erickson with West Hollywood, and Doug Zinsman with the Mayor of LA's office. Thank you. Take it away, Melody.
Our first 3 speakers will be Ren, Larone, and Alexander. Ren, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, yes. Hi, thank you so much for having these meetings and taking our feedback. So I do want to say I support the hybrid option. And as someone who's been very interested in the West Side Extension, this is something that I think is a really good alternative to that. And it also serves the Grove and Cedars and the CBS TV city. I also support the addition of a Santa Monica La Cienega station and the Hollywood Bowl station, which I think was a missed opportunity when the Red Line was built. I also like the hybrid design because it serves most people and businesses, and thinking that even compared with the other options, that slight increase in distance might actually have a lot of drop off in ridership. And as someone who has lived in Mid-City, like 4 o'clock in Mid-City is gridlock everywhere. And I understand like this is a very, very needed and necessary route to have. Now that I live in Los Feliz, I still would come in and see like Mid-City, West Hollywood as a destination itself that I would definitely go to via Metro. I also would encourage, I would very be interested in finding the funding resources to have this done by the Olympics, because 2047 is a very, very long time from now. And I was also thinking another additional station I would suggest would be Little Ethiopia, which I think is another great destination itself. And if the resources are available, I would like more than one exit to be at each station, because currently the Red Line only has one exit for each station. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next 3 speakers will be Alexander, Molly, and Michael. Alexander, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Alexander Wickstrom. I'm a Mid-City resident. I want to advocate for the La Brea or Fairfax alternatives, specifically from the lens of equity. Now, I know that the hybrid alternative has the largest number of jobs or population, but that's due to it being a very long line. I would rather see that somebody who's getting on the train at Slauson and Crenshaw be able to reach a job at Hollywood and Highland or a doctor's office in that area faster. And while 8 minutes may not seem like a long time, from that destination further south, it's going to add an immense amount of time. So the La Brea and Fairfax alternatives are better in this way. I'd further like to also consider elevated alignment along La Brea if it saves money and allows for better station access areas. Furthermore, like the city of West Hollywood, I think could fund bus lanes along Santa Monica if they want better east-west travel options. I think this is a north-south line fundamentally that I think would better serve people in areas that need more investment and have not seen the investment given to them. I think it saddles people with a longer commute. You know, if I live close to Wilshire Boulevard as I do, it's not going to really matter to me the 8 minutes, but for the people further south, more travel time means more potential delays, and that means that they could not really access the jobs the same way. So please consider the equity impacts of saddling lower income riders further south of the project area as you move along the hybrid alternative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Molly, Michael, and Abe. Molly, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Yes, hello. My name is Molly with my little son Davey here, who's very excited. Who's very excited about the project. Yeah. What the alignment that we think would work best for the community would be the West Hollywood hybrid alignment. I understand the concerns about increased travel time, but there's just so much population density, both residential and in terms of jobs within the alignment route, that I really feel that's the investment that Los Angeles County really needs right now. I also wholeheartedly support the Hollywood Bowl extension. Anybody who's lived or traveled in that area during events can tell you that the surface street options like shuttles and buses are not sufficient. So having an underground transit option would also be highly beneficial. Davey, did you want to say something really quick?
Yes, I wanted to say I want the West Hollywood Park one because it is near the park, near West Hollywood Park and Rocco's and other restaurants around it. And of course the dog park, don't forget that. And
all right,
the
Davey.
library there and everything.
All right, there's 30 more seconds. Let's thank the nice people, okay? One last statement for 30 seconds.
What should I say?
Let's just say thank you.
Thank
And
you,
again, the West
Anna.
Hollywood alignment is what we would be going for, and the Hollywood Bowl one station extension.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We just
Okay.
really want that.
Okay.
Our next three speakers will be Michael, Abe, and Peter. Michael, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Oh. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you for having me. That's a tough act to follow. I'm a resident of Wilshire Vista, so right by Crenshaw and San Vicente. And in general, I'm in favor of the West Hollywood hybrid alignment. Because of the long distance between Mid-City crossing and the Fairfax and LACMA station, I believe it should be explored that there is an option that's about 2 miles. So along San Vicente, whether above or below ground, it should be explored maybe around Hauser or something in the middle so that our neighborhood can have access to the transit being constructed. I also think it should be explored in the process, again, along San Vicente, because I'm right adjacent to it, though it looks like a wide boulevard, it is. And I think there's a potential opportunity to explore a park. I think, if we're going to be talking about replacing San Vicente with transit, or at least if we're going to follow San Vicente all the way to West Hollywood, then the street itself could be converted to public good, community benefit. and park space, allowing only local access to neighborhood residents and commercial businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Abe, Peter, and Nick. Abe, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Abby Land, and I am a West Hollywood resident. And thank you all for holding this meeting and giving us all this information. I want to strongly support the hybrid. I think that it will serve more people, takes people to jobs, and I know those jobs will increase by the time in 47 that it's finally built. And I do urge us to see where we can find funding to make this happen more rapidly. Also, I like the underground. I think that that is probably the best way to go. And I would love to see an additional station at Santa Monica and La Cienega, as well as the station at Hollywood Bowl. At the end of the day, it might cost more money now, but the impacts last for generations. And I think it's well worth us taking the time to do this right, to meet the needs of most of the people, and to do whatever we can to make this system connect in a way that gets us backwards and forwards, up and down quicker than ever. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Abby. Our next three speakers will be Peter, Nick, and Jonathan. Peter, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time from your weekend to come talk to us about this. I'll be most sympathetic to the La Brea alignment, and I have the most concerns for the West Hollywood alignment. I think there's a conflict between whether this extension will be regional or local travel, and Metrorail is intrinsically regional travel, and the WeHo alignment seems to be mostly for local travel, and I think that could be supplemented with bus rapid transit. It's a great alignment, but it's not a great alignment for regional travel. There are concerns in regards to finance, the measure and formula, and whether WeHo will have enough local contribution funds to build a project in terms of the alignment, as well as having it underground, as most stakeholders, I imagine, will want it. Also the private sector is skittish in funding traditional transit services. So I'm skeptical that a private-public partnership will help boost those funds. And also I understand that a lot of people want, or that people like, the WeHo alignment because it serves a lot of jobs, but frankly, throwing a bowl of spaghetti at a map of LA will do this. Quite frankly, WeHo is not the backbone of the jobs in Los Angeles County. The Wilshire corridor is. And if we make travel and transfers to the D Purple Line extension inconvenient through longer travel times, I think that's where the opportunity will be lost. So the La Brea alignment will be best in connecting regional travelers and connecting to the D Purple Line, which is where most jobs are concentrated in Los Angeles County. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Nick, Jonathan, and Michael. Nick, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, thanks so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Nick Andert. I'm a resident of Hollywood, and I'd like to speak up in favor of actually adding an option to the environmental review, which is the La Brea alignment along with a spur that goes into West Hollywood. I was surprised this actually wasn't part of the original review, and I know that Metro has studied spurs and other lines before, especially with the Purple Line when they studied a West Hollywood spur back then. I feel like that the spur, if it initially went along Santa Monica Boulevard, would actually be less total mileage than the hybrid alignment, and thus would probably be similar in cost. And it would be the best of both worlds, where we would have the north-south connection on La Brea for the rest of the city that is fast and direct, and that would also serve all the jobs and population in WeHo. And it looks towards the future and preserves an east-west corridor on Santa Monica as a future transit alignment, as opposed to the hybrid alignment, which would preclude that from becoming a future line and basically force everyone to use the hybrid alignment and go out of their way if they're trying to go north-south, basically as long as this line exists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Jonathan, Michael, and Jordan. Jonathan, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I thank you guys for letting us comment on this. I think it's a very important project and I really want to see the northern extension completed. I commute from, I often go from Loyola Marymount up north to Hollywood to hang out or to go to North Hollywood to visit family. And I often have to bike from LMU to the Expo line, go all the way downtown, and then go all the way to on the B line, the red line, to get to Hollywood. And that just takes forever. And so I want to advocate for the fastest route going north-south, which would be the La Brea alignment. And I want to add on to Nick's comment, advocating for the Santa Monica spur. I'm concerned that the hybrid alignment would prevent us from building a better network in the future by the end of the century, and the Santa Monica alignment could go east and west on Santa Monica and then go south on La Cienega to connect to the Purple Line again, and then further south to Culver City, which is another job center, and then west on Venice to hit Venice Beach, which is another tourist destination. And then the Santa Monica line could also go east on Santa Monica to connect to the Red Line again, and then through Silver Lake, Echo Park, Dodger Stadium. It could go to Union Station and then further east into the San Gabriel Valley. So I just hope that we have a broader, longer term view for the health of the network by the end of the century. And I want to advocate for the La Brea alignment with a Santa Monica spur option. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Michael, Jordan, and Linda. Michael, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hey, hello. Yeah, thanks for putting this on, taking public comment. Yeah, so looking at the original, main objectives of this project, the first two items on that list are to close regional transit network gaps and to provide faster, more direct service. And I think that, adding a bunch of local stops in West Hollywood is directly in conflict with the primary goals of what we're doing here. And while it's nice to expand coverage, and I'd love to do that, with things like bus lines, adding 8 minutes onto people's commutes, to their trips, is no small deal. For the 90,000 people that'll be using this route every year, that's 5 million hours a year that people are going to be sitting there for that 8 minutes every day. So it really adds up quick when you think of all the people that'll be using this line. I think talking about coverage can be, while coverage is nice, it can be a little bit of a distraction from a conversation about ridership. If you look at the projected lines that we're talking about, the projected ridership for these is in between 88,000 and 90,000 for each of the lines that we're discussing. So it doesn't mean that more people will actually be using or riding the line if we add more stops. Yes, it's nice to add coverage, but what we're really doing is making that trip longer and harder for the 80% of people using this route who aren't going to be making those stops. You're making the route worse at what it's supposed to be doing, which is, closing that regional transit gap. It's a regional line, not a local line. I'm pretty strongly against adding these local stops, especially because they add so much time. I think there's a lot of other transit solutions that we can poke at that will expand that access, expand that coverage without adding on to the commutes of all the people that will be using this line on a day-to-day basis. Thanks again for having this.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Jordan, Linda, and Bronson. Jordan, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jordan, and I am a resident of West Hollywood. Thank you guys so much for holding this forum, especially on a weekend. I want to voice my support for the West Hollywood hybrid line. I'm lucky enough where I'm positioned in the city where any of the 3 lines would really benefit me greatly. But I think having the hybrid line would be great for the LA community as a whole, because it not only stops at really important places like the hospital and other huge businesses like the Beverly Center, but it would also help incorporate people who don't necessarily have access to cars or easier travel, like the large elderly population in West Hollywood or communities of color. I think the idea of having bus lines that go east and west is really difficult and won't be the easiest thing to do, because Santa Monica Boulevard or other streets that go east and west are already down to just 2 lanes going each way, or sometimes even 1 lane going each way if there are cars parked. And it's just not feasible to do that. I think some other benefits of having the West Hollywood hybrid line are that if there is a stop at San Vicente, there is the West Hollywood Park that's right there, which would be a great place to have a stop, or there's also the bus depot there that could serve as a stop as well. I think it would be smart to add a stop to La Cienega. And I also think that if Fairfax for some reason didn't work as a stop, just 3 blocks west is Santa Monica Boulevard and Crescent Heights Boulevard, where, from what I understand, the city of West Hollywood owns a plot of land there that's just sitting empty right now. Just to build off that again, I think it might be better to have that and then have bus lines be going north and south, maybe on the La Brea line. So I see my time's wrapping up, so I'll end it with that. Thank you so much. Oh, and I also support the stop at the Hollywood Bowl.
Thank you very much. Our next 3 speakers will be Linda, Bronson, and Charles. Linda, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Linda Nagove, and I've been a resident of the South Bay for about 10 years now. And I just want to express my support for the project and to emphatically urge Metro to build it much sooner than 2040s. I mean, we've been all anticipating this. I just can't even bear another 10 years. I really think that the San Vicente Fairfax route would be best because it would allow people from the South Bay a fast and convenient ride to areas that are some of the hardest to get to from the South, like Cedars and Grove, the Grove area and Miracle Mile. And then I just really think that the doing La Brea instead would be a huge missed opportunity that Metro would regret for decades, much like they did with the Green Line failing to reach LAX. I don't understand why we would wait until the 2040s just to save a few minutes for trips all the way to Hollywood. Subways can get people to places quickly and efficiently, regardless of traffic. Metro should take advantage of the fact and put stations near the busiest places in the county and where all the jobs are focused in crowded areas, not the mansions of Hancock Park. Just to have a fast rail line that links LAX, Miracle Mile, the Grove, CBS, Beverly Center, Cedar Sinai, the Sunset Strip, WeHo, and Hollywood and the Bowl. I just think that would just eliminate so many of our traffic on our roadways. It's not worth missing all that to save a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next 3 speakers will be Bronson, Charles, and John. Bronson, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hello, Bronson. Take it away. Go ahead and speak, Bronson. You're a little low, Bronson. Maybe we can come back to you're a little broken up.
Boy, it's embarrassing. You skip me, I'll come back again.
Okay, Billy, we'll try to get it back later.
Our next three speakers will be Charles, John, and Dan. Charles, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Charles Cordero, and I grew up in the Miracle Mile area. I'm also an architect and have pondered the stretch between, I guess, what I presume is a historical transit center over at at Venice and San Vicente, and the stretch all the way up through to where it would, I guess, transition up to Fairfax. So the way I view it is historically, I guess, when there used to be a rail line going straight up San Vicente, they had the bridge or whatever, like what you guys are suggesting. But in my research, it said that speeds were quite high because they were able to get that straight stretch. So with that in mind, I was just curious that there might be an opportunity, and kind of hark back to a comment by Michael earlier, that there might be an opportunity to use that stretch instead of a highway for gaining speed to maybe create a green parkway stretch alongside it. I'm very interested on how this would be bisecting our community, Miracle Mile community, from Pico up to Wilshire. You know, it's basically splitting portion of the Miracle Mile. So anything that can be done to creatively address that section in a sensitive fashion would be greatly appreciated. I know that the city of LA right now is planning on putting bike lanes along that stretch, which is a good sign. I don't know if it's short-sighted in comparison to what Metro would be doing to enhance the area. Okay, thank you very much for listening to my little soliloquy. I hope you can address those issues sensitively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be John, Dan, and Stephen. John, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hey, John, we can't hear you. Okay, Melanie will try to come back to John.
Our next three speakers will be Dan, Lerone, and Bronson. Dan, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Metro so very much for doing this line. It'll be very popular. It'll be a staple of our system, and it will be used by Hi,
Yeah,
can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm so sorry about
dropped
that.
off.
Sorry about that. My internet just picked that moment to go cuckoo. All right, we go back. So I encourage you to please pick Fairfax and or the hybrid. Your video advertised the Grove, Television City, Beverly Center, Cedar Sinai, West Hollywood, and all the working class jobs they're in as potential stops. La Brea misses all of them. The only thing that you serve on the Beverly and La Brea are 2 gas stations and a car rental. I encourage you to please, please, please. We voted 85% for Measure R in West Hollywood and Mid-City West. Our neighborhoods are counting on Metro Rail. We want Metro Rail. We'll say, yes, build this here. So please, 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 I ask you to please consider Fairfax or the hybrid. that will serve the most people. La Brea is only 3 minutes faster than Fairfax and only 8 minutes faster than the hybrid. So you'd be skipping all of these stops that you've advertised. You'd be not serving these neighborhoods that voted overwhelmingly for measures R and M for no reason. Even if you're going to study a spur, which is not currently on the table, it needs to be a spur from Fairfax. Don't skip the neighborhood, serve it. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Lerone, Bronson, and John. Lerone, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Oh, hi, and I also want to add my thanks to Metro for hosting this. I wanted to really strongly advocate for the hybrid alternative because it just seems bizarre to me to prioritize the stop serving the Hancock Park neighborhood rather than the much more densely populated areas that would be served by the hybrid alternative and which would be served by, which would much more likely have transit riders. I don't think that the extra 8 minutes is significant at all in the context of how long people are willing to sit in traffic in the city. You might be able to tell from my accent that I grew up in London, where the tube lines don't always follow the most direct paths, but people know it's still much faster and easier to take the tube than sit in traffic. And nobody minds being on the tube for a few more minutes because they serve the most popular, the most attractive parts of the city where people work and socialize. And in the long run, it just makes more sense. So yeah, I'd like to advocate for the hybrid alternative, and I'd like to push for this to be done as soon as possible. I think waiting till the 2040s is just not going to make you be able to stand up as a sort of world-class city in the way that other cities are able to serve their communities. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our next three speakers will be Bronson, John, and Lindsay. Bronson, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hey everybody, is this working this time?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be here talking to y'all. It's so exciting to hear that there's so many passionate people here in LA, and, you know, passionate about getting rail to each other. That sounded weird. So Metro, you know, is investing its money in one spur line. And I want to kind of add on to what some other people are saying. It's, if we're really investing in the long-term future and not just the short term, it's almost inevitable that we're going to need two lines. One going up the Crenshaw line, which would maybe go up to La Brea or take the hybrid. The second would be the obvious Santa Monica would go down La Cienega all the way down to Venice. I mean, I think it's foolish if we choose to go with the La Brea option and absolutely just throw away all of WeHo and Fairfax and all of these neighborhoods that are advocating so passionately for this line. So, you know, as so many people have already added, La Brea has, what do we have on La Brea right now that is not, dire to get transit at the rail level right now besides BRT? This is something that is not going to be a big deal if we add a couple of minutes for several different stations. Like someone said with the tube, no one minds if you're curving around a little bit and taking an extra couple minutes. The 8 minutes difference between La Brea and the hybrid option is only the maximum if you're going between Hollywood and Highland and the end of Crenshaw and Expo. So, just to cap it off, I just want to say I support the Hollywood Bull Station. I support the hybrid unless we really go with both options. And with all due respect, this isn't regional or commuter rail. This is local rail. So we're going to need stops at Hauser if we're going on San Vicente. We're going to need one at La Brea because the hill from La Brea to Mid-City is just too much to walk. So people are going to, we need stops that are kind of in between these places. These are not cut through places. These are destinations that people live. People live in Mid-City. People live in Wilshire Vista. People live in these small neighborhoods that we're passing through that we shouldn't be passing through.
Thank you, Bronson. Thank you very much.
Our next two speakers will be John and Lindsay. John, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Well, it looks like a second time around. But again, John, we still have our hotline, the email. You can definitely reach out to us. Sorry we couldn't hear you during this forum. So maybe we'll try again later. But go to the next caller, Melanie. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Lindsay. Lindsay, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Well, this isn't Lindsay, this is John Erickson, council member for the city of West Hollywood. Our links seem to be getting mixed up, but that's okay. I just wanted to echo the support. I've been in all 3 of these meetings, and it's great to see West Hollywood residents as well as people in the surrounding community. And I just wanted to reemphasize a couple of main points as a younger member of the city council. 2047 is when I probably will be considering moving to Palm Springs in the ritualistic way in which we all leave West Hollywood to go to Palm Springs. But when we look at the ways in which this will open up West Hollywood to the South Bay, imagine going on at San Vicente and Santa Monica and being able to get to LAX. When I worked at LAX and helped develop the people mover and the transit systems that are in place there right now, I was meeting with Uber and Lyft, and some of the highest percentages of people that took direct lines right from our area to LAX to get on a plane was West Hollywood. With this route itself, we'll be able to get those people out of cars. We'll continue to address the climate crisis, and we'll continue to make sure that we can get connected to the communities that we've been not been able to connect only except through cars and traffic. We want to make sure little Davy can get to that park. So we want to ensure that we're opening up all these amenities to what we can do and what we can with the jobs, with Cedars, with the Beverly Center, with all of those options that the hybrid provides. And specifically when we talk about that extra 8 minutes, I just sat in my car for 8 minutes while waiting near La Brea, by the way, to make a left-hand turn. So when you think about the ways in which I would have rather been moving on a train and continuing to push that forward, this is good for the communities of all shapes and sizes. This is good for the environment, and the hybrid option is the best option, not only for West Hollywood, but for the local, regional, and West Side community to make sure we're all connected. I urge Metro and thank them for doing all this work. But again, support for the hybrid option. And of course, a stop at the Hollywood Bowl. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker.
Just in case if you're on the line and you got the green light and you've been unmuted, go ahead and speak away. Speaker, unmute and speak.
Oh, am I on the mic again?
Yes, you are.
I just wanted to add one thing I didn't get to say before was I do like the spur option that was proposed earlier. If we went La Brea and then cutting off with the, adding the additional hybrid option, it seems like the most long-term plan, the smartest long-term plan. And I also did love the idea of taking San Vicente and the median that we already have with the infrastructure and the trees and the grass we have there, and just adding some simple sidewalks and benches and turning that into a long linear park. I think that's just an easy opportunity for the city to increase, pedestrian activity in that area and make it safer for people to be out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Matthew. Matthew, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, I wanted to echo other commenters asking that a spur be studied as an option. I think that should be studied for both an option for the La Brea and Fairfax alignments, as just like the station in Hollywood Bowl is being studied. Also, I would like you to continue studying La Brea aerial alignment and not cancel that out of hand from consideration. I think people have ideas of an aerial alignment defacing a street, and on a wide street that's honestly unbearably sunny often for most of the year on La Brea. I think maybe if you could produce some appealing shady renderings like you did with the Sepulveda line to at least show people that could look nice. And in terms of the spur, otherwise, if you maybe something like the Inglewood People Mover as an option for WeHo gets included, like you included that with the southern segment of the Crenshaw line. And I'd like you to study seeing if you can get some revenue to help pay for it from some sort of development on the metro property in West Hollywood by the Pacific Design Center, which could be an incredible place for development that could possibly help pay for whether that's a spur or the hybrid to accelerate this. Because obviously the time with which it's on the current schedule is way too long, and hopefully we can get money from the federal government and everything, but possibly some development in that extremely desirable place to develop that Metro currently owns. And then you have the sheriff's station there, also county property, should be considered as a way to get this done faster. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Melanie, I just wanted to take a second to recognize Councilmember Seppi Shine with the City of West Hollywood has joined us as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Patrick. That was actually our last speaker.
Well, we're going to stay here till noon. So for those who might have joined later or feel so moved to make a comment, you can go ahead and do so now. We really encourage those who have not spoken before to speak. So we give everyone a chance to speak. So, but as I said, we'll stay here till noon to give everyone a chance, especially for people who might have joined later. So.
Our next speaker will be Stephen. Stephen, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Oh, I guess he's gone. Our next two speakers will be Rick and John. Rick, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Rick. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
So I'd like to echo a lot of the comments supporting the West Hollywood / San Vicente hybrid option. I note the point about the 8 minutes additional delay, but I think the issue is not so much whether it takes a few people a little longer to get somewhere, but whether we can save more time for more people. And given that the studies have shown that the West Hollywood hybrid option would serve the most people, would attract the most ridership, you'll be saving more money, more time for more people, and taking more drivers off the roads. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be John. John, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Sorry, so embarrassing. Thanks for having these meetings. And I also although I guess John Erickson is here, not Lindsay. And so John, you can tell Lindsay that I am acknowledging Lindsay for her proactive work in making this happen. and as quickly as possible. I'm excited because, you know, it's like when I moved here in 1988, we were just choked with congestion. And, you know, we all love to talk about how LA used to have the greatest transportation system in the world until the oil companies and the tire companies, you know, destroyed it. And then Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, and the Red Line was featured prominently. And it was like, oh my God, that would be so awesome. And now with all these period pieces about LA that have been made recently for cable TV, my heart always jumps when I see the trolleys and such. So this is just fantastic. And in keeping in that theme, you know, transit tells a story, and I guess it depends upon what kind of story you want to be telling about LA in, you know, the new century moving forward. Looking back, though, I will say that San Vicente is a unique and unusual boulevard in the city. It's the only street that really cuts across the grid. And I think that it can serve the same purpose that it served in our history today. So I am voting for the San Vicente West Hollywood line because of all the places it would hit. You know, from hospitals to culturally significant places like the intersection of San Vicente and Santa Monica, while also hitting the other ones. And I think that the 212, I think, is the La Brea bus line. I take it a lot, and it serves its purpose very well. And so if you need to go up La Brea, you can do that. Of course, having a line up La Brea would be fantastic too, and up Fairfax. I do have some questions that I'll send in an email to you, though.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Stephen. Stephen, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Stephen. Thank you for having me and for hosting this event. I'm calling in to support the West Hollywood hybrid line. I feel like the line would serve a population that's been underserved in public transit for so long. I moved here in 2000 and was dismayed that West Hollywood is home to where all the walkers are, and they're the ones most likely to take public transportation, and they have no ready access to the subway. And by running a line through San Vicente, you would not only get the Grove, you would also get the Beverly Center and the hospital, and let's all talk about it, Boys Town, which is really necessary. There are a lot of commuters there, and there are a lot of residents there, as well as Fairfax and Santa Monica and La Brea and Santa Monica. I live at La Brea and Fountain. I think La Brea there's not much going on La Brea, north and south, except for those bakeries. But if you want to get all the commuters and all of the residents, you should definitely take the West Hollywood hybrid line. And I think it would cut down on pollution for the entire city and increase racial equity for all, because if you put all those people in the subway, it's going to alleviate traffic for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Lindsay. Lindsay, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
I'm John, I'm not Lindsay. Hello, so I'm gonna talk. So I just spoke, but here are some of the questions that I know you're not gonna answer, but these are just thoughts that I had, and some of them are just simple and, you know, sort of silly. But why was there an above option or an originally above, I don't know what you call at grade component for that stretch that you mentioned down by San Vicente and Quito, I think. I'm just curious why that was the case. Will the Hollywood Bowl extension only be open seasonally? I'm from Chicago and we have stuff like that. Are you there? Am I still on? No, okay. And we have stuff like that. We had stuff like that in Chicago. It would just be open during the summer. And as far as the Olympics goes, gosh, it would be so great. Like if it was available by the Olympics. That's only like what, 7 years away. But two thoughts on that. One is it might not be 2028. It could actually be 2030 now. Who knows? Japan may not be able to throw it in this year, and it might be delayed. And so the Olympics may actually all be moved 2 years. I have no idea if that's the case. I'm just sort of thinking about that. So if it's 2 more years, does that actually make it give us a greater sense of possibility that we could get it done sooner? And then is there any thought that once it's decided what the line will be, like immediately start a bus route that mirrors that line as closely as possible to get people excited, to bring it into the present as much as possible, and actually then maybe help generate the momentum we need, sort of on a psychological scale. And as far as the West Hollywood extension line goes, I think in terms of La Brea and all, I think we need to sort of consider how far west until we have any public transportation. Think about it. It's like there's nothing going north-south like west of us. It's like the 405 freeway. So, moving it to West Hollywood in a way, at least now, La Brea is east, it's like West Hollywood at least begins to sort of bring the region sort of closer together in a public transportation kind of way.
Thank you very much. Project, that was actually our last speaker.
Okay, for those who might have been cut off, or maybe we called John and it said it was Lindsay, please feel free to raise your hand. As I said, we'll be here till noon. So if you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Or if you just like to email us, you see the email there, crenshaw@metro.net. Or also visit the website, metro.net/Crenshaw North. And also you can go to, once there, you can go to the meeting tab and you'll scroll down a little bit and you'll see a link for the presentation, which is actually a story map, which is very similar to the presentation that was given today. So as I said, we'll be here till noon to give everyone a chance to speak. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Lindsay. Lindsay, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
This is actually Lindsay, and I commented the other day, so I just wanted to mention that my gratitude to Metro, as well as to everyone who's participating in this process. It's very exciting to hear public engagement on making our transportation systems more improved and bringing connections to where people are. So thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Gerard. Gerard, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
All right, good afternoon. I'm just wearing my transit nerd hat. With the San Vicente alignment, is there a possibility of placing a surface station? Because I know there's a opportunity to go completely underground, and there's still one alternative that runs down the median of San Vicente, much like it was done for the Crenshaw project through Hyde Park. Is there a possibility of putting a station around the San Vicente Hauser area that still get within walking distance of Little Ethiopia, serves that area, and provide additional access to the community, given that will be like a good probably mile and a half distance where there's no station or no stop in that location. It's just something to keep in mind for the Fairfax as well as the hybrid options that utilize that portion, to include that for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Bronson. Bronson, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Thanks for having me once again, everybody. I just did remember a couple other things. I did enjoy what the last person did bring up about Hauser, as that is a crucial central point of many different neighborhoods there, and the center, kind of centralizes on San Vicente Hauser. So while I support the San Vicente hybrid route, I think that that Hauser stop, along with maybe a La Brea or even slightly before Redondo stop, just because of all of those hills and the walking is very strenuous. That could be helpful for a lot of people to get them actually on the train instead of saying, I don't really want to walk that far. I'm just going to take a car. If you look at a density map of Los Angeles, you'll actually see that some of the most dense neighborhoods right along that San Vicente route, especially that Hauser, Fairfax, kind of up in La Cienega area, you'll see that those are the actually slightly more denser areas of the city. Whereas if you look at La Brea, you'll see that these are actually some of the lowest density parts of the entire city, neighboring on Hancock Park. So if we're really looking to get as many riders as possible and connect the city and make this a legitimate transit city, then I think that's probably the best option for us. One last thing I did want to bring up with the inevitable mid-city station. I assume there's probably going to be a station, where the parking lot is now, where kind of near the World on Wheels and CVS and Bank of America, which is such a huge opportunity for Metro to, build affordable housing, retail, all of these opportunities. It's just a perfect parcel of land, a parking lot open, it's just ready for you to take in and do the best thing for the people with that. So, definitely look into that and looking at Mid-City as a hub for the future of not just the Crenshaw North line, but maybe other lines that come through there, sort of like a 7th Metro where Union Station would be. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Matthew. Matthew, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, I don't need all 2 minutes. I just wanted to add, with regards to the studying of area alignments, whether that's for La Brea or San Vicente, a request that you add a study of sound levels for, to compare the sound of a passing electric metro train to the sound of traffic, which, I mean, I in my opinion is much louder, but I'd love for you to have those numbers out there so decision makers could see very clearly what an aerial alignment means in terms of sound. All right, thanks a lot.
So Melanie, are we seeing any hands, any late hands in the last 22 minutes here?
No, there are currently no hands raised.
Okay, we'll stay here.
Oh, actually a couple hands just went up.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So our next 2 speakers will be Charles and Ren. Charles, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak again. I'm really impressed with, as an architect, with planners on how you guys have great meetings. Architects always walk into the office and everyone's like, get drawing, but I really appreciate the vetting that planners do. On the other end, pursuant to my last comment about San Vicente Boulevard, I just wanted to make a statement about La Brea in that I know that the aerial is kind of planned for La Brea, but personally, I would think it's totally overscaled for that street. I mean, there's a small lot retail, 2-story for most of the segment, unless you guys want to turn that all into giant, larger scale sort of density, which may be the ultimate thing if you go up La Brea, but I just think it's too much for that street. And thus, I didn't voice anything in regards to supporting, but I do support the the hybrid option through into West Hollywood, and to support the other commenters that made statements to the ridership, et cetera. 8 minutes. 8 minutes doesn't seem too much to me. Albeit, again, back to the San Vicente option, I think if it went underground in that section, you could really pick up speed. You might be able to bridge that gap. But personally, I think it's probably going to go the overhead bridge and grade route. And again, I just wanted to reiterate that there could be an opportunity to create some sort of linear park to help bridge the transition for the Miracle Mile neighborhood. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Ren. Ren, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak again. So I did want to also add on to one of the early speakers talking about how she lived in the South Bay, and then how, yes, I do think that the hybrid alignment would draw in a lot of people from not just the local area, which we know like a lot of people who live in WeHo really want the alignment, but also people who live in South Bay, because I used to live in Torrance before I moved to Mid-City. And for me to drive, I would have to drive into town. So there are many people who live in the area who would love to come into the city and enjoy places like the Grove, WeHo, and like all those kind of places. And also addressing the point earlier made about jobs and the regional connectivity. Is it inconvenient for someone who wants to get from south of the 10 to Hollywood or north? I do understand that consideration, but there are also a lot of jobs for people in the area, in the Grove and West Hollywood area, because a lot of those places aren't really affordable for people to live in. So a lot of people do come in by car or bus to have those jobs. And I do think that this this extension would be a benefit to get people to those jobs who can't necessarily live in those areas. And since the other thing I did want to point out is that since we did study Santa Monica as a West Side extension like 10 years ago, I do think it's time to have that area served. And even though I am partial to the idea of a spur, I do worry that taking the extra time to do that study is going to push us off from like 2040 to like 2050. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Rick. Rick, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, it's me again. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, very good. I live in the South Bay, and as far as people from down here coming up to Hollywood, I'm not sure, frankly, how much sentiment there is for that, but I think you'd get more ridership from down here if a park and ride lot is installed somewhere along the line, perhaps in the vicinity of the Midtown Crossing area. And it sort of goes to my general point that transit in LA would work the best if it works with people's private cars rather than against them. Give people the option of driving to some station along the line, parking, and then taking the train to where they need to go. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. If anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand. Our next speaker will be Gerard. Gerard, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
All right, just thinking about the Hollywood Bowl location, because I think that's actually a good addition to the line. on top of what the last speaker just talked about on the park and ride component, because it's seasonal. And I think all those lots there could be, something that could be done jointly, because I don't expect it to be a joint development location for Metro, given the large crowds that occur around the bowl, and as well as the Ford Theater right nearby. So I think that's an opportunity that's worth considering. Additionally, with that particular site, in terms of how you would construct it, and this may be something that will require further study. Would it make it easier to continue or build the tunnel boring machines that are needed to construct this line, if it's all done in one full segment, or if it's broken up into phases? That could be something that could be beneficial to the ease of construction of this line, having that station at the Hollywood Bowl. And it could even be like a really simple, trench style station that folks can just walk down, and in that big median that's in the middle of Highland Avenue. All right, sorry about that. There must be some background noise. Just want to add on, echo of the Hollywood Bowl station, and what the potential of that could be for easing the constructability of this corridor and this project. So thank you.
Thank you very much. If anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, our next speaker will be Rick. Rick, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Maybe Rick is not here, or just didn't hear the announcement. So are there any other hands that are up? Or
No, there are currently no hands raised.
okay,
Actually, a hand just went up.
Okay, go ahead.
So our next speaker will be Todd. Todd, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, thanks. I'm a little late to the game here, but I just wanted to chime in with something. I lived in Washington, D.C. area and then in Manhattan, moved out here about 10 years ago. And apologies for joining this party late, but I wanted to voice my preference for having the San Vicente hybrid line. 100%, I think that's the option. Living in D.C. and in New York, the more areas that are served, the more useful it is. And I think that going through the sweet spot of West Hollywood for going out for friends, I know that a ton of my friends would use that if that was an option. Whereas the La Brea and the Fairfax options, I don't see them as being useful. I'm sure there are a million other things to consider, but I just want to voice my strong support for that. And to echo the other guys, the Hollywood Bowl, I think is fantastic. That traffic around there when the Hollywood Bowl gets going is disastrous at times. And so having that option of not having to do stacked parking or $20 extra parking is huge. So kudos on pulling us all together. I hope we can speed up that timeline and make this stuff a reality as quickly as possible. So thanks, that's everything.
Thank you very much. Our next 2 speakers will be Rick and Matthew. Rick, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
So regarding the Hollywood Bowl, I think what I was about to say earlier got cut off. I'm in favor of the Hollywood Bowl stop if it can be done with the funding that's available, but I'd hate to see the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so perhaps might be a suggestion for Metro to do that as an add-on option later. get the funding for the main line. I still, as I said, wholeheartedly support the West Hollywood option. And then if the funding becomes available for the Hollywood Bowl, I'd be all in favor of it.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Matthew. Matthew, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, so hi, with regards to a lot of people are seem to be interested in the prospect of using this the West Hollywood detour to access nightlife or the Hollywood Bowl or whatnot. I'm just curious about if you're going to have planned operation hours in your study, because for most of the metro lines, you know, nightlife isn't really an option because you cease operations at midnight or something like that. So yeah, I'd just like for you to clarify what the intended or expected operations hours are, so people don't think that they're asking for something that actually isn't going to be available to them at the time they're going to want it. All right, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Bronson. Bronson, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, I just wanted to agree with Matthew that I agree. I think that Metro should look into expanding its operating hours, maybe past, you know, what it's currently doing. I think that would open up a lot of new ridership for certain people that weren't riding as much before. I mean, I think the obvious example would be the New York City Metro is obviously running 24/7 again. It's just so many more people use it because of that. A lot of people who are working late, working at bars, especially working at bars, and you don't want to drive if you had a, you know, a drink or two. It's just a much safer option. It gets cars off the road, less DUIs, less, you know, accidents, less deaths. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand. I see a couple hands just went up. Ms. Shell, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Michelle, if you're still there, it's your opportunity. All right. Well, for the sake of trying to give, hopefully, one of the new speakers an opportunity to speak to the next person.
So we currently have 2 hands raised, Bronson and Rick. So our next speaker will be Bronson. You will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Okay, I see the hand just went down. Our next speaker will be Rick. Rick, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
I like the comment about expanding ridership hours and would like to suggest that if that's to be done, that be done especially on Friday and Saturday evenings. Perhaps it isn't necessary to run all night on weeknights, but for those 2 nights, I do think it would have a lot of benefit in terms of taking potentially drunk drivers off the roads.
Okay, thank you very much. If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand. Our next speaker will be Bronson. Bronson, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Just wanted to add, with not just access to the bars with the ridership hours being expanded, but there are actually a lot of working class, manufacturing jobs, people working in, factories working downtown, maybe in the fashion district. A lot of these people work odd hours, and a lot of them don't have access to cars, or maybe they're using transit or public transit already, or, giving these working class people options at odd hours of the night could be very beneficial for, the lower and middle class of Los Angeles. Thanks again.
Well, Melanie, it looks like we're down to 5 minutes. So we really, as we kind of mentioned before, we want to kind of hear from, stakeholders, participants, what your thoughts are on the project. We don't really want to go back and forth between each other. So if there's other speakers, new speakers, please raise your hand.
Our next speaker will be Michael. Michael, you will now be prompted to unmute your mic. Please unmute your mic and begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes.
Hello, I'm in favor of the Fairfax alignment. I think it's a good compromise. I agree that the La Brea alternative doesn't serve as many jobs and residents along the route. While I'm in favor of all the stations in the hybrid alignment, I think that it is convoluted. The 8 minutes is an unacceptably long travel time to add to every journey that's ever going to be undertaken here. And I feel strongly that the spur proposal ought to be explored. I think that the West Hollywood residents we've heard from today who are in favor of the hybrid route, we haven't had the benefit of hearing what the advantage of the spur with the potential to expand the system regionally into east and south along Santa Monica Boulevard and down La Cienega Boulevard. That would potentially in the future pick up all of those stations in a much more productive way and serve the system regionally in a much better way. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank for everyone who came out to view the presentation and make comments today. The last day, well, the scoping period ends on May 28th, so please submit your comments by email, call us, whatever works. But since we're going to shut off at noon, that will be the last speaker. We're not going to ask for anyone else to jump up right now. So anyway, again, thanks for coming out, and please reach out to us if you need any additional information. Also go to the website. There might be other items you might want to see there that might answer other questions, but otherwise, we're still, we still want to hear from you and learn from you what you want to see in this project. So that's all. Thanks, Melanie. I think we can close this out.